I used to think the title belonged to someone else's life. A clickbait headline you scroll past, shake your head at, never imagine attaching to your own. But I know exactly where it began. The day the shop went quiet, tools cooling on the bench, and she was the only other person in the room. The auto repair shop wasn't mine. I was just the youngest guy they'd hire, hustling through college with grease under my nails. The air always smelled like burnt oil, metal, and the stale drip of coffee someone left in the pot too long. I was used to the noise, compressors, radios, half-shouted jokes between mechanics. That afternoon was different. The place emptied early, rain tapping against the big metal door. When I looked up from the brake pads I was fumbling with, she was still there. Mara, my stepbrother's mom. My stepmother, technically, but we never used that word. She didn't wear it like other women wore titles. She carried herself like she'd already survived a whole history that none of us could really touch. Mid-40s, hair pinned up in a way that looked accidental but wasn't, voice low and steady. She was just supposed to be waiting for her car inspection. Instead, she'd wandered back into the shop, leaned against the doorway, and watched me working like she had nowhere else to be. "You always this careful?" she asked, nodding toward the wheel I'd been tightening. I wiped my hands on the rag, suddenly aware of how clumsy I was standing there. "Careful beats reckless," I said, trying to sound more confident than I felt. Her smile barely moved her mouth, but it reached her eyes. She didn't say anything back right away, just lingered, arms folded, as though she was studying me. I couldn't read if she was amused or weighing me against something else entirely. The silence pressed harder than the rain outside. I cleared my throat, filling the air. "You didn't have to wait in here. The lobby's warmer." "I like the smell of the place," she said. "It's honest. You know when something's broken in here. People aren't always like that." It was the kind of line you're not supposed to think about later, but I knew I would. She stepped closer, brushing a strand of hair back with her wrist. For a second, I thought she might touch the wrench on the counter, but her fingers stopped just shy of it, hovering, hesitant. A small, unfinished gesture. "You've got steady hands," she added, almost under her breath. The comment landed harder than it should have. My grip tightened on the rag, and I laughed too quickly, the kind of laugh that betrays you. I wanted to ask what she meant, but the words got stuck. She noticed. I could tell she noticed everything. Then the moment broke. My phone buzzed on the counter, a sharp vibration that cut through the quiet. I didn't pick it up. By the time I looked back, she was already turning toward the doorway again. "I'll wait out front," she said, voice lighter, almost casual. But she paused before leaving, one hand resting on the doorframe just a second too long. Like she wanted to say more. Like she almost did. And then she was gone. I stood there with the rag still in my fist, replaying every second of her voice, her glance, the way she'd looked at my hands. It shouldn't have mattered. But I knew, even then, I'd carry that silence with me, and it would only get heavier. I didn't expect to see her again so soon. 2 nights later, my phone buzzed with a message from my stepbrother. "Mara's stuck. Go help her. I'm working late." No details, just an address and the assumption I'd say yes. It was a hardware store parking lot on the edge of town. The lamps overhead threw yellow circles across the wet pavement, and her car sat there with the hood propped open like a wounded animal. She stood off to the side, arms folded, a jacket too thin for the drizzle. "You came fast," she said when I pulled up. Her voice wasn't surprised, just tired. "Starter's dead," I asked, already peering into the engine. "Won't even turn over." She exhaled, rubbing her temple with 2 fingers. I hate asking for help. That last part wasn't for me. It slipped out sideways, the way people confess to themselves when they're worn down. I grabbed my flashlight, checking wires, pretending I wasn't listening too closely. She hovered nearby, but didn't fill the silence. Just stood there, jacket pulled tighter, the rain beating in her hair. "You okay?" I asked finally, more than about the car. She gave a quick laugh, sharp, dismissive, not real. "It's just a car. I've handled worse." But her eyes gave her away. They carried a weight, something layered underneath that she wasn't about to offer me. I kept working, but I noticed the little things. The way her hands tightened around her elbows, knuckles pale against the fabric. How her laugh faded too quickly, like she regretted even letting me hear it. And the way she shifted her weight from one foot to the other, restless, as though standing still made her feel exposed. Battery connections loose, I said after a while, tightening the clamp. Try it now. She slid into the driver's seat. The car roared reluctantly to life, and her shoulders dropped with relief. When she got out again, she didn't smile exactly, but her expression softened, something unguarded slipping through. You saved me, she said. It was nothing. Her eyes stayed on me a moment too long. Not in the way of gratitude, something else. A hesitation, like she was weighing what to let slip and what to lock away. Then she looked down, brushing her hair back, and the moment closed up. You didn't have to come, she added, quieter this time. I know. I shoved my hands into my pockets, not trusting them. But I wanted to. That made her glance up again, quick, sharp, like she hadn't expected honesty. A beat passed. The rain ticked on the hood between us, steady, insistent. Then she reached out, just briefly, touching my arm. Barely there. A light squeeze, gone before I could even react. But the warmth of it lingered, spreading slow, impossible to ignore. Thank you, she said, and this time her voice was softer, almost unsteady. She stepped back, keeping distance again, but that touch, it stayed. And driving home, I kept flexing my arm like a fool, chasing the ghost of her hand, knowing it was already too much. The storm hit harder than the forecast said. Sheets of rain hammered the shop roof, rattling the windows and drowning out the radio. I was closing up late, sorting sockets back into the wrong drawers, when the door creaked open. Mara stepped inside, damp around the edges, her hair pulled back but frizzed loose from the weather. Power's out at the house, she said, shrugging her shoulders against the cold. Figured I'd wait it out here. If that's okay. I nodded too quickly. Yeah, sure. It's fine. She hung her coat on a hook, settled into the chair by the counter like she'd done it before. The overhead lights buzzed, humming louder than either of us. I poured her the last of the coffee, and she accepted it with a quiet, thanks, wrapping both hands around the cup like it was something fragile. For a while, the only sound was rain on the roof and the occasional clink of a tool I pretended to organize. I couldn't stop noticing her, how tired she looked, but how even her tiredness carried a kind of grace. Her laugh lines, the ones she tried to hide when she pressed her lips together. The faint shadow under her eyes, like she hadn't slept well in days. You ever feel like you missed your turn? She asked suddenly. I looked up. Missed my turn. Yeah. She traced the rim of the cup with her finger. Like everyone else kept driving. And you? Took the wrong exit. Her voice was steady, but her hand trembled against the porcelain. She caught herself, set the cup down too quickly. I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to tell her she hadn't missed anything, that she was the only person in this room who seemed like she knew where she was going. But the word stuck. Instead, I said, I think about that a lot. Her eyes met mine, sharp and searching, as if she didn't expect me to understand. That glance lasted too long, too loaded. Something inside me pulled forward, reckless, ready to bridge the gap. And then her phone buzzed on the counter. A name flashed across the screen. I didn't recognize it, but the way her mouth tightened told me it wasn't someone she wanted to hear from. She silenced it without answering, setting the phone face down. Sorry, she muttered, though she didn't owe me an apology. The air between us grew heavier, like the storm had slipped inside with us. I leaned against the workbench, arms crossed, holding myself still. Every nerve wanted to move closer, to touch her hand, to say something I couldn't take back. She seemed to sense it too. Her breathing slowed, her gaze dropped to the floor. The lights flickered once, then steadied. I stepped forward without meaning to, closing the distance by a half step. Close enough to see the faint rise of goosebumps along her wrist. Close enough that if I reached, but I didn't. Her breath caught, like she was bracing for something. My hand twitched at my side, fingers curling in and out, useless. And then I forced myself back, turning to the shelf behind me as if I'd forgotten some urgent task. Neither of us spoke, but the silence said everything, that we'd both stood on the edge of something and turned away at the last possible second. The next time it happened, there wasn't a storm, no broken car, no excuse. Just the two of us in the house after everyone else had gone. The TV was on in the other room, low enough to forget. I was at the kitchen table, pretending to scroll through my phone. She was rinsing a glass at the sink, movements deliberate, almost too careful. The distance between us wasn't much, 10 feet maybe, but it felt unbearable. Every sound mattered, the tap running too long, the clink of glass against porcelain, the scrape of the chair when I shifted. Finally, she shut the tap and stayed there, hands braced on the counter. Her shoulders rose and fell once, as if she was about to speak, then stopped herself. I couldn't take it anymore. "Mara," I said, my voice smaller than I meant. She turned, drying her hands on a towel she didn't need. Her eyes found mine, and there was nowhere to look but back. I started, then stopped. I hated how my throat tightened, how my chest felt caught between saying too much and not enough. "What are we doing?" The question hung there, heavier than the silence that followed. She leaned against the counter, towel twisting in her hands. For a long time, she didn't answer. Her gaze stayed steady, though it pinned me, unflinching. Finally, she let out a breath that sounded like it had been caged for years. "I don't know," she said. Quiet. Honest. I nodded, but it wasn't enough. My palms pressed against my thighs under the table, trying to ground myself. "It doesn't feel normal," I said. "Not anymore." Her jaw tightened. She looked down at the towel, folding and unfolding it like she could fix this moment with neat edges. Then, almost to herself, she whispered, "It was never normal." That line hit me harder than anything else she could have said. She wasn't denying it. She wasn't pretending. We just stared at each other. No flinching this time. My chest pounded, but I didn't move closer. I couldn't. I stayed where I was, because if I crossed that space, there'd be no undoing it. Her eyes glistened in the dim light, but she didn't blink. It was as though both of us were waiting for the other to flinch first, to step back into safety. But neither of us did. Finally, she broke the stillness. "You remind me of the person I used to be," she said, voice cracking on the last word. "And I don't know if I can stand it." She set the towel down, turned away before I could answer, and left the room. I sat frozen at the table, her words burning through me. She hadn't touched me. She hadn't needed to. That single confession was worse, more dangerous, than anything her hands could have done. And I knew, after that night, nothing between us could go back to silence again. She avoided me for almost a week. No late-night drop-ins, no sidelong glances in the garage. Just silence. Enough of it that I started to wonder if I'd imagined all of it. Every pause, every line that had felt like it carried something beneath it. Then one evening, I found her in the den. The house was mostly dark, only the desk lamp glowing against her face. She was bent over a box I'd never seen before, an old wooden thing, worn at the corners. Papers, envelopes, a few curled photographs spilled across her lap. She didn't notice me right away. When she finally looked up, her eyes widened, not in surprise exactly, more like being caught with something she hadn't meant to share. "I didn't hear you come in," she said. Her voice was low, strained. I gestured toward the box. "What's that?" She hesitated, then pulled one of the photos free. A man, younger than I'd ever known her to be, smiling wide with his arm wrapped around her shoulders. She held it out, then drew it back halfway, like she'd changed her mind. But eventually, she placed it in my hand. "My husband," she said. I stared at the image. He looked nothing like me. Stronger jaw, older, more sure of himself. But the way she looked at him, her eyes bright, unguarded, that was the part that hurt. I'd never seen her look at anyone like that. "He died 15 years ago," she added, almost flatly. "Car accident. He was driving home from work." She cut herself off, pressing her lips together hard. I didn't know what to say. My throat tightened. Useless. I set the photo back on the table gently, as though mishandling it would break something else. "You remind me of him sometimes," she said suddenly. Her eyes flicked up to mine, sharp and raw. "Not in how you look. In the way you listen. The way you hesitate." The words hollowed me out. I wanted them, and I didn't. I wanted to matter to her, but not as a shadow of someone else. I shifted on my feet. "Is that why?" I couldn't finish the question. Her silence was answer enough. She reached for the photo again, sliding it back into the box with trembling fingers. Her shoulders hunched, as if she'd given away more than she meant. When she spoke, her voice was nearly a whisper. "You're too young to understand what it means to lose your whole future in one night." The lamp buzzed softly. I thought I saw her eyes shine, but she blinked fast, turning her face away. I wanted to reach for her hand. I didn't. Instead, I said the only thing I could manage. "Maybe. But I understand what it means to lose something before you even have it." That made her look at me again. Really look, like she couldn't decide whether I'd just wounded her or touched something she thought was buried. And in that silence, with the photo still face down between us, everything shifted. It happened without planning, without excuses. Just another night where everyone else was gone, and the house seemed too big for only two people. She was on the back porch, a blanket around her shoulders, a half-empty glass of wine balanced on the railing. The air was cool, the kind that makes silence sharper. I stepped out, unsure if I was welcome, but she didn't tell me to leave. For a while, I just stood beside her, leaning on the railing, watching the yard dissolve into shadow. Crickets chirped, a dog barked down the street, but out here it felt sealed off, private. She spoke first. "I've been unfair to you." Her voice was low, steady but tired. I shook my head. "You don't owe me anything." "That's not true." She pulled the blanket tighter, gaze fixed on the dark beyond the fence. "You didn't ask for this. I should have kept my distance." "You think I didn't?" The words slipped out sharper than I meant. She turned her head toward me, eyes catching the porch light. I swallowed. "I tried. I still try." Her lips parted, then closed again, like she was searching for language that didn't exist. Finally, she sighed, a sound full of surrender more than defeat. "This isn't about right or wrong anymore, is it?" she whispered. I shook my head slowly. "No, it's just us." She let the silence stretch, testing it. Then she set her glass down, carefully, like it mattered how it landed. When her hand brushed mine on the railing, it wasn't an accident. Her fingers lingered, tentative at first, then steady. The warmth of her skin was enough to undo me. Neither of us moved closer, but the air between us folded in, smaller, heavier. "I don't want promises," she said finally, eyes still on the yard. "I can't give you that. Not with who I am, not with what I've lost." "I'm not asking for promises," I said. My voice was quiet, but it felt like the truest thing I'd ever said. Her head tilted, just slightly, until it rested against mine. A touch so soft it barely counted as contact, yet it carried the weight of everything we hadn't said. We stayed like that, two people holding a silence too big for words. No declarations, no resolutions, just breath, warmth, the pulse of something we both knew couldn't be undone. And in that stillness, I understood, it wasn't about winning her or keeping her. It was about this. Being here, at the edge of something neither of us could name, but both of us had chosen. The night carried on around us, indifferent. But on that porch, the world felt narrowed down to a single truth. We'd crossed the line, gently, irrevocably. And there was no going back. I think about that night more than I should. Not the way movies would frame it, with fireworks or swelling music, but the smallness of it. The weight of her hand brushing mine. The way she leaned her forehead against me like she was both exhausted and found. That's what stays. The quiet. Time has passed since then. We never turned it into something we could parade in daylight. It wasn't that kind of story. But it changed me. I used to believe love had to be loud, declared, posted, made official. With her, I learned it can live in silence, in restraint, in the ache of almost. I learned how much meaning can fit inside one pause, one unfinished sentence. She changed too. I saw it in the way she carried herself afterward, less guarded, less like she had to hold the whole world together alone. She never stopped being careful, but there were moments, small ones, when she laughed freely again, when her eyes softened instead of bracing. I knew then that whatever this was, it had given her something she thought she'd lost. It wasn't about filling the absence of the man she loved before me. I'll never pretend I could. It was about reminding her she was still capable of connection, that her story hadn't ended 15 years ago. And for me, It was about realizing that sometimes the people who teach you the most about love are the ones you can't keep. When I look back, I don't regret the silence, the restraint, even the confusion, because all of it was real. And real is rare. That's what haunts me, not the impossibility of it, but the fact that it happened at all. So yeah, I was alone with my stepbrother's mother, and what happened still stays with me. Not because it was scandalous, but because it was human. Two people crossing into something neither of us planned, both of us changed. And maybe that's the lesson, if there is one. Love doesn't always fit the rules, but it leaves its mark whether you want it to or not. If this story made you feel something, let me know in the comments. Would you want more stories like this?